Hello YouTube, hello friends, welcome to Lizzie Faye Loves Books. I'm Elizabeth, and yes, the title of this video is correct. This is my May wrap-up for 2019. Many of you probably didn't even notice that I never uploaded a wrap-up for the month of May. I did film it early in the month of June, and for whatever reason, just never got around to editing it and uploading it. And so today I dusted it off and took out the parts that were not relevant anymore and decided to go ahead and upload my wrap-up for the month of May. The main thing I participated in was middle grade May. I also have an ongoing challenge to myself each year to read a book a day in May, and I did that. So let's go now to the footage that I already filmed several weeks ago and show you what I read for the month of May. Hello BookTube, hello friends, welcome to Lizzie Faye Loves Books. I'm Elizabeth. So in this video I'd like to do a quick wrap up of what I read in May. I did a mid-month wrap up for May, so I'll give you the stats of everything I read for the whole month and try to give you an extra sentence or two about the books that I finished since my last update. The big thing that I usually participate in during the month of May is Middle Grade May. That is hosted by from Akossiwa K, and I know she is super busy. She did an announcement video, and then I don't think she's been able to do any other videos since then, but Elizabeth Tyree took care of the Goodreads group and was awesome about posting the quotes. She did several video updates of what she read, so definitely check out her channel. I did read, I think about half of what I read for the month was middle grade, and I had some other books to read, some book club books and review books and things like that, so I didn't get to focus solely on middle grade books, but I really did enjoy most of what I read, and several of the books were in print and several were audio. And so let me first show you what I read that was middle grade during the month of May. And because I was participating in my own challenge to read a book a day in May, which I dubbed #book a day in May, and also Elizabeth Tyree was participating in that with me, then we both accomplished that. I think she read something like 36 books or 37, and I hit 34. Only 5 of them were actual tiny children's books. I read 5 Nate the Great books, which I've talked about in the past, so I won't go into those, but you can look at my Goodreads page and if you want and see which Nate the Great books that I read. So anyway, let me tell you about the middle grade books that I read. 5 of them were off the new Sunshine State list, which was just announced at the end of April, and I talked about a few of those earlier in the month. I read Ivy Aberdeen's Letter to the World by Ashley Herring Blake, and I read Captain Superlative by J.S. Puller, and then I read Knockout by K.A. Holt. That is a sequel to House Arrest by K.A. Holt, but it's not necessary that you read them in order, although I did. One of the books I read during the month was House Arrest, but one definitely occurs before the other. Several people on Goodreads call them companion books, but definitely Knockout is a sequel to House Arrest, and I think you will appreciate Knockout a lot more if you know the history of the characters if you read House Arrest first. But it's not absolutely necessary to read them in order, but if you're going to read them both, then why not read them in order? Now, I wasn't able to get a physical copy of House Arrest from my library. They didn't have it, but I did get an e-copy on Overdrive, so I was glad that I was able to get that. Both books are written in verse. They're very quick reads, and they're just very good. So when I do my overview of all the Sunshine State books, I'll talk a little bit more about actually what's happening in the books. But in Knockout, it's about a boy who is in middle school, and when he was a baby, he had a trach. And so his mother has always been very cautious about him doing anything physical, and he really wants to be a boxer. His dad takes him to a coach, and they discover that he's really good at it, but the family is just not sure that he should participate in that kind of a contact sport. So it's very good, and the first book is about when he was a baby, and it's told from the eyes of his older brother, who does a lot to help take care of him. In fact, he does so much to help take care of him, he makes a few bad choices and is under house arrest and has to write a journal. So those are very good books. I did thoroughly enjoy them, and they are by K.A. Holt. Then on audio, on Overdrive, I listened to Nightbooks by J.A. White. I thought it was creepy, but not overly scary. It has some ties to Hansel and Gretel, and then a little bit of an ode to 1001 Nights. And so I thought it was very good. It's about a witch who imprisons a boy and a girl and what they do to try to escape. So if you like creepy books that are for a middle grade audience, then you should definitely check that one out. And then the last Sunshine State book I read for the month of May is All's Fair in Middle School by Victoria Jamieson. This is a graphic novel, and it is about a girl who has basically grown up at a Renaissance fair. Her parents have worked in a Renaissance fair for as long as she can remember. They have other jobs during the weekday, but she has spent a good portion of her life at the Renaissance Fair, and she's been homeschooled. So now for middle school, she's going to go to public school, and it's quite a culture shock. So I thought this was a very good book. I did really enjoy it. It's a story of friendship. It's a story of learning how to interact with people who are different than you, who maybe have come from a different background, and it's a story about middle school. So I thought it was very good. Now let's go through the other middle grade books that I read or listened to that are not on the Sunshine State list. Because Elizabeth Tyree was reading this, I also picked it up, Garvey's Choice by Nikki Grimes. This is another book written in verse. So that made a total of 3 books written in verse that I read for the month. So this is about a boy whose father really wants him to play sports, and Garvey has many other interests, and they don't really involve sports. So you can understand how this might go, and I know this is a common theme among students and their parents, so I think this is a great book to read for both students and parents. It's a very quick read. So if you have a middle schooler, see if they can get this at their school library, or if you can get it at your public library. I think this is a good book worthy of picking up. One of the last books I listened to during the month of May is Squirm by Hiaasen. Hiaasen does a great job with his middle grade books. They all have an environmental theme, still some of the same types of quirky characters that he puts in his adult books, but without all of the foul language. There were even a few places where he would use the word expletive in the place of an actual bad word. So somehow he figures out a way to work it in. But it is a very entertaining book. Now you might guess from the name and the cover that this is going to involve snakes, and I was prepared for it to have a lot more snakes than it actually did. There were some snakes involved, so if you're not a snake person at all, you might not want to pick this up. But I thought it was a very good story. It's about a boy who's never met his father, and he finds out where his father lives and goes there to meet him. And the snakes are worked into the story. He doesn't even know what his father does for a living, but he quickly finds out, and it turns out it's something kind of mysterious, and it's also environmental. So it was a fun story, definitely unusual, as Hiaasen's stories usually are. And if you have ever read any of his other middle grade books, then definitely you'll want to pick this one up. I don't know that this was the best one. If you have never read any of Hiaasen's middle grade books, you might want to start with something like Hoot or Scat, but I thought this is definitely worthy to be added to the Hiaasen middle grade catalog, and I'm glad that I read it. One of the series that I am trying to complete from beginning to end during my 20 by 20 project is the Kingdom Keeper series. There are 7 books in the original series, as well as a couple of novellas. This is book 4, called Power Play. The author is Ridley Pearson, and these all take place in and around Disney World, at least the first 4. I don't know if they're going to go to Disneyland at all, but so far all of these have taken place in Disney World and Florida. And throughout the books you see a lot of places that are actually there at Disney World, and now because they're a few years old, there are some places that aren't there anymore. Like this book opens at Disney Quest, which is no longer there. It makes me wish I had gone. I never did actually go to Disney Quest, but at least through this story I kind of get a feel for some of the things that were there, so that's kind of cool. And this was, I think, maybe a little better than the last one. The last one I think was just too long and it was too drawn out, but this was a little bit shorter, although not that much shorter. There were some slow parts, but because I enjoyed the setting and I know the characters, I did enjoy it. The audiobook narrator is MacLeod Andrews, and I know Jen from Jen Talks Audiobooks has spoken very highly of him, and I don't think he narrated the first 2 books, but he has done books 3 and 4. And I'm not a fan of how he does all of the characters. There's one character named Philby who has a British accent, and MacLeod Andrews' rendition of Philby's accent kind of comes and goes and changes a little bit here and there, and sometimes it's just not very believable. Some of the other characters he does great, but that particular one, I'm not a fan of how he does it, and I'm not a real big fan of how he voices the female characters either. So maybe he's not the best narrator choice for this book. I'm sure that he's wonderful for other books, but for this series, I am finding that I'm not enjoying him as a narrator. So Jen, if you're watching this, let me know another book that you think he did a fantastic job on so that I can give him another chance. The next 2 books are by Christopher Paolini. I don't know if you would necessarily consider these middle grade books. Certainly if a middle grade student wanted to read an 850-page book, they certainly could. I believe that this whole series was in Katie's middle school library, so for that reason I am including them in my middle grade May wrap-up. This is book 4 in the inheritance cycle, and I did enjoy it. It is a fantasy series about a boy who rides a dragon, and it's a very good series overall. I have heard other people comment that maybe there could be less pages in some of these books, and this one I think was a little slow, maybe the first half, but then once it picked up and really started moving along, then the pace picks up more and you can really get a satisfying conclusion to the series. And when I finished it, I looked up Christopher Paolini to see what he had written since finishing Inheritance, and I discovered that last year he published a book of short stories, and there's going to be more. This is Tales from Allegasia, Volume 1, The Fork, the Witch, and the Worm, and there are some short stories here from the world of Allegasia. I did really enjoy these. It's a fairly small book with kind of large font, so you can get through this quickly, and if you are a fan of the inheritance cycle, you'll definitely want to pick this up. I was reading through some of the reviews, and there were people who had read this way back when it came out, and they were super excited to get this book because it's more from the world of Allegasia. Okay, I read 4 different books for my 3 different book clubs, and I already talked about all of these in my earlier wrap-up in the month. I read Sworn to Silence by Linda Castillo. I talked about this in my Amish in April wrap-up, even though I read it in May. This does take place in Amish country, but it is not your standard traditional Amish romance. This is very gritty, very dark, but I think it was definitely worth reading, and if that sounds interesting to you, then you might want to pick it up. Just know that there is a good bit of foul language, and that Kate Burkholder, the main character, even though she was born Amish, she is not Amish anymore, and so don't expect that she will act Amish because she has totally converted to modern ways, even though her roots are Amish. I also read Murder at the Mansion by Sheila Connolly. I listened to that on audio, and I will list all of the books down below that I read during the month of May. And if I listen to a particular book on audio, I will list the narrator in that list as well. I also read Eve by William Paul Young and Big Little Lies by Leon Moriarty. And I mentioned earlier that I have some review books to read. I didn't get a whole lot done on my review books in May, but I did finish the Writer's Apprentice series by Julia Buckley. I was sent book 4 for review, so I listened to books 2 and 3 during the month of May, as well as book 4, and now I'm caught up with that series. So it was Berkeley that sent me the Writer's Apprentice book by Julia Buckley for review, and then Waterbrook and Multnomah sent me an Amish book. It was a finished copy of The Christmas Remedy by Cindy Woodsmall and Aaron Woodsmall. So I started this in April and then finished it in May, and I did really enjoy it. So I got a surprise package in the mail the other day, and the return address said Penguin Random House, and it was the newest book that is coming out by Cindy Woodsmall and Aaron Woodsmall called A Christmas Haven. And this one is an advanced reader copy. So I am very excited about this. I don't know anything about it yet. I have not even read the back, and I will tell you about it as soon as I read it. I might possibly go ahead and read this for the Summer Romance Book Bingo. There are a couple of prompts that want you to read a book set in winter or at a winter holiday, and there is a prompt to read an Amish book. So somewhere on the bingo I may be able to fit this in, and I'll let you know about it then. And speaking of review books, I also got Becoming Us by Robin Jones Gunn from Waterbrook and Multnomah. And I said in my mid-May wrap-up that I had started it and I was going to try to work on getting it finished in the month of May, and I did not. Instead, I focused more on finishing my middle grade books. But now, during these early days of June, I have spent a lot more time in this book, and now I'm at the halfway point, and I'm really enjoying it. I'm so excited to get into a contemporary Christian fiction book. The majority of the Christian fiction that I've read has been historical, and I am really enjoying this one. So this is the first in a series called the Haven Makers series, and it's definitely a series that I will plan to follow and continue. So when I finish this, I will give you a better review of it, but as of right now, at the halfway point, I'm really loving it. I had two nonfiction devotional type books that I finished during the month of May. One was by Corrie ten Boom called Don't Wrestle, Just Nestle, and I had started it right at the end of April and got only about half done with it, so I finished that up in May, and that was very good, very inspirational. And then I also mentioned this one in my mid-May wrap-up. This is Wake Up Smiling by Audrey Meissner, 40 Devotions for a Hope-Filled Life. Then I remembered that my Sunday school class was going to be reading The Purpose-Driven Life, and we started this one, I believe, on the 27th of May, and I did not get to start it until the day after Emily's surgery. So my husband and I are both reading this. We doubled up the first few days so that now we're caught up with the rest of the group. But this is basically a 40-day devotional book where you read a portion each day for 40 days. And I think now we're on about day 10. So I am really enjoying this. I've had this on my shelf for a long time. The church where we went before this one, the one where we went for 19 years and eventually it disbanded, we did this as a study as our whole church several years ago, and I never actually read the whole book. So I'm happy to say that I am finally now reading this book from cover to cover and getting to experience the inspiration that it provides. All right, and then the last few are just some miscellaneous books that I read throughout the month. I finished Murder in the Mist by Willard Scott and Bill Kreider. I mentioned this earlier. This is book 2 in the Stanley Waters mystery series. There's only 2 books. Of course, we know Willard Scott from morning television. I thought it was a very entertaining book. If he ever writes more, I would read them. Then for Sarah's Audible Romance Challenge, she draws out 2 categories each month, and you can either listen to what she's listening to or you can pick your own book from the same category. So I've been picking my own books from the categories that she draws out. So one of her categories was inspirational, and I listened to Love Found in Shamrock, Texas by Teresa Ives Lilly. Now, what stood out about this for me is that my aunt and uncle used to own a gas station / truck stop in Shamrock, Texas, and I've never actually been there, but I thought it was really cool because the setting of this is a diner / truck stop in Shamrock, Texas. So I thought that was really cool, and it was just a very short little romance book, quick story, sweet story, and I really did enjoy it. It's set at St. Patrick's Day, and so if you ever need a book to read or listen to on St. Patrick's Day, then this is one you could pick up. And then her other category was Modern Royal, and I listened to Princess in Peril by Janet Whitehead. This was interesting. This was about a member of a royal family. I believe it was a fictitious country, and some people were holding him captive and drugging him, and they had produced someone who was acting as a double to sign some sort of agreement which would mean a lot of money for the bad people. I don't really understand all of the politics of it, but they hire a nurse to watch the actual Duke, and she figures out what's going on because the story they give her sounds really fishy. So she quits giving him the drugs and eventually learns what's happening. So she helps him escape, and it goes from there. So it's really good. It was also fairly short, and I thought it was a fun way to meet that category. And then, sadly, I have finished the last full-length novel in the Harmony series, One True Heart by Jodie Thomas. I listened to this on Audible on the romance package, and it was very good. I was a little disappointed because there were mostly new characters in this. There were a couple of people whose storylines were wrapped up a little bit better, but most of the characters that have had main storylines in the previous books were barely mentioned in this book. It was mostly about new characters, which is fine. It was a very good story, and of course it's still Harmony. It's still Jodie Thomas, who I love as a writer. I think she does a fantastic job spinning stories with awesome characters. So I am happy that I read it, but I'm a little sad because there's only one little short story left in this series, and I'm kind of sad to be done with it. But I have all the books. I can always reread them. It's on the Audible Romance package. As long as they're on there, I can listen to those as often as I want. So I will be glad to check another series off my list. But a little melancholy because it's coming to a close. I've really enjoyed Jodie Thomas's books. She's got a brand new one that just came out this summer that I'm really looking forward to reading. And even though this series is coming to a close for me, I still have plenty more of her books to read. So near the end of the month, I was looking at my 20 by 20 challenge, all my series that I have stacked in my Stack the Series challenge. And one of the series that I really want to finish this year is the Elm Creek Quilt series by Jennifer Shimarini. I discovered that there were a few other companion books and short stories that are associated with the Elm Creek Quilt series that are not linked to it. So when you search Elm Creek Quilts, they don't come up, and those had gotten past me because I've just been searching Elm Creek Quilts. And on my Kindle, I purchased 2 books that were apparently a part of the series. One of them was called Quilter's Ghost, which takes place in Elm Creek Manor, and it is definitely a part of the Elm Creek Quilt series. All of the characters, all of the Elm Creek quilters are in the story, and it is a Halloween story, so it's really cute. And definitely, if you're a fan of the series, don't miss that one. It's one that you should read. It's cute and very short. And then I also bought one called The Fabric Diary and the Runner's Quilt. It's 2 short stories, and I don't think that this is necessarily a part of the Elm Creek Quilt series unless the characters in these books are side characters from the series that I just didn't remember, because it's been quite a few years since I started reading that series, and it's possible that the characters in this story made appearances in the Elm Creek Quilts novels, but I'm not absolutely certain. It is quilt related though, so perfectly acceptable to read as a part of the Elm Creek series, and I'm glad that I got it. So I think that's everything that I read. It was a total of 34 books. It was an even split between print and audio. 17 were in print and 17 were on audio. Of the print books, 2 were ebooks and 1 was a graphic novel. 5 of the print books were children's books. Those were the Nate the Great books that I read. 3 of the middle grade books were in verse. And then I had 2 nonfiction books that were devotional books. Overall, it was a fantastic reading month. I really enjoyed most of what I read, and I'm excited that I did average out to more than a book a day in May, and the range was pretty large. I went from the really thin Nate the Great books, which have just a few pages, all the way up through Inheritance, which has 850 pages. Of course, I listened to this on audio. If I had had to sit down and read this one in print, I would still be reading it. And the audiobook narrator is Gerard Doyle, who was very good. He has narrated the whole series and did a great job. So I did get a lot of middle grade books read during the month of May, for middle grade May, but there were a few on my potential TBR that I did not get to that I hope to get to sometime very soon. I did not read book 3 of The Trials of Apollo, The Burning Maze by Rick Riordan. I did not get any more of the Series of Unfortunate Events read. I have a goal to read this whole series by the end of 2020, and I've only read 1 so far, so I really need to read 6 of these this year and 6 of them next year. Maybe by the fall I will get back into this series. I really just want to read more family drama and romance, women's fiction, that type of thing this summer. I want to focus on that. So I will maybe get back to this hopefully in September or October. And the same for these. This is the last 2 books of the Spiderwick Chronicles by Holly Black and Tony DiTerlizzi. I did not get to these either, and I know they're going to be super quick to read, but I just didn't get to them. And then because I was finishing up the Inheritance Cycle, I thought I would get the Ultimate Unauthorized Aragon Guide read. It's by Lois H. Gresh, but I did not get to it either. And so that's it. That is what I read for the month of May. So let me know what you read for the month of May. Did you participate in middle grade May? Did you read a book a day in May? Let me know. And that's all I have for this video. I hope you're having a great day. Read a good book, and God bless you.